I moved into my new apartment a week ago. I'd been meaning to look for a new place for a while now, but just couldn't bring myself to do it due to the long working hours and laziness. But when the oven broke for the 5th time in 2 months and the landlord refused to pay for repairs, it gave me a boost to move out faster. I had been living there for about a year without a contract since it was cheaper and close to the center, but the apartment itself lacked a bunch. It was hard finding any suitable place at first, location and price-wise, but after a couple of days of searching, I saw one ad for a 2-bedroom apartment not too far from my own. The price seemed like a really good deal too, so I wasted no time calling the agency. After scheduling an appointment with an agent, I met him in front of the apartment building. "Hi, I'm Nicholas." He shook my hand with a big grin. The apartment itself looked pretty new, so I hoped what I saw in the pictures in the listing was not deceiving. The friendly agent led me inside, and we took the elevator to the 3rd floor. "This whole place is new," he said. "They just finished building it a year ago, so everything is top-notch." "And what about the owner? When do I get to meet him?" I said, staring in front at the elevator door. "Yeah, you probably won't get to. He keeps to himself a lot. In fact, no one from the agency ever saw him in person either. He's verified and all, just doesn't like people, I guess. All you gotta do is pay rent online and that's it." I simply brushed this off as a good thing. I was tired of my previous landlord coming monthly for apartment inspections, so the thought of being able to live in a new apartment without even seeing the new landlord was appealing, to say the least. "Right this way." Nicholas unlocked the door to apartment 304. When he opened the door, my jaw dropped to the floor. I had seen the pictures online and the apartment looked amazing, but those agencies usually polish the pics a little. What I was seeing in front of me was exactly what I saw in the pictures, no more, no less. A spotless apartment which looked so flawless it contrasted even the building itself, which was without blemishes. "The living room is over here. And right here, connected to the living room, is the kitchen." The agent perkily showed me around, but I was barely able to focus on what he was saying, being mesmerized by my ostentatious surroundings. Everything in the apartment seemed brand new. "So, the price we talked about, I just want to clarify. That's the price the owner wants?" I asked, confused as to why someone would be renting a place like this one so cheaply. "Yep, that's the one." Nicholas nodded. "I know, you think there's a catch. That's not what I was." "It's okay. I'd be suspicious, too. But I can assure you, everything is in order here. Let's check the bathroom." The bathroom itself wasn't very spacious, but it did have a fancy shower, which more than compensated for it. The bedroom was neatly organized, with a big bed on one side and a desk on the opposite. Since I work as a freelancer, this kind of setup seemed perfect as my office and sleeping space. "This is amazing. I can't believe it's so cheap." I smiled in bewilderment. "When can I sign the contract?" "Right away, if you like." Nicholas led us back to the living room and we sat by the table, after which he pulled out a bunch of papers. He explained about the bills and everything that was included in the apartment, after which he gave me the papers and asked for my ID in return. "So, I'll just need you to sign all of these." He pointed to the blanks on the papers, eagerly awaiting. I signed quickly, afraid he would change his mind if I didn't do it quickly enough. I glanced up and realized there was still a door we hadn't opened, down the hallway, next to the bathroom. "Hey, what's over there?" I pointed tentatively. "Oh, that." Nicholas' tone suddenly dropped. "Probably a storage room." "Probably?" I chuckled. Yeah, it's been locked since the start. Owner said the room's lock is rusted and he hasn't been able to open it in ages, and apparently it would cost a lot to take the door down and repair the frame. If you need a place for some extra things, you also get storage in the basement for tools and bikes. Will that be a problem for you? No, not at all. I shook my head, not taking my eyes off the sturdy-looking door. In the end, who cared about one tiny room in the apartment, which wasn't even mentioned in the listing? I signed all the papers and Nicholas gave me the keys. It was all done so quickly that I didn't even have time to form any suspicions. I was just happy to get such a fancy place at such a low price. I wasted no time moving my stuff from the old apartment, much to the grumbling of my previous landlord, who felt that I should leave the deposit to him due to furniture damage and the last-minute notice. I happily agreed, telling him in return that I would call the IRS to inform them of taxes he avoided by not making a contract. He dropped the idea and returned the deposit money without any further issues. I spent the first few days in my new place trying out the fancy kitchen utilities, washing machine, etc. I hadn't really focused on the locked storage room, but given my curiosity, despite what Nicholas told me, I tried the knob, pulling and pushing violently a couple of times before letting it go. After that, I simply forgot about it. The tenants mostly seemed to be either at work or inside their own apartments when I came in and out, and I only saw one elderly lady about a week after I moved in. I was walking towards my apartment and she was unlocking the door to 307. Hi, my name's Nathan. I live in apartment 304. We haven't met yet because I just moved in. I tried to introduce myself and immediately realized how stupid it must have been to try striking a conversation with an elderly stranger, despite being neighbors. She glanced at me sideways with a frown and then rapidly went inside and shut the door behind her. Well, that was rude, I thought to myself, but decided not to let it bother me. Overall, everything was great in my new place despite the unpleasant neighbor. That is until about 2 weeks since I moved in. One day I was returning from visiting a friend, and as I put the keys into the keyhole, I froze. As soon as the rattling of the keys started, there was a sound coming from the inside of my apartment. It sounded like someone was scurrying off in a panic with a quick and heavy bat of footsteps. And then it stopped. I paused, trying to figure what I was hearing. I put my ear against the door, trying to hold my breath as much as possible. Did that really come from inside? There was silence. I stood like that for a whole minute and nothing happened. And then a loud thud resounded from inside. It sounded as if someone knocked something heavy on the floor. I was sure I heard it from my own apartment, so I decided the safest thing to do would be calling the police. I backed away from the door, pulling out my phone, not breaking my gaze from the door. 911, what is your emergency? The operator asked. There's someone in my apartment right now. My address is... I proceeded to give them my address, and the operator explained a patrol would be there soon. 2 police officers arrived a few minutes later, and I pointed them to the apartment. They drew their guns and barged inside, shouting warnings to whoever was in. I waited in anticipation for a few minutes until they came back out, guns back in holsters. They asked me about the locked door, and I explained that it was a storage and has always been locked. They told me no one was inside and probably never was either, claiming I must have heard the sound from elsewhere. When I assured them the sounds came from inside, they shook their heads, explaining there were no signs of forced entry and nothing seemed to be out of place. Windows were closed, too. I thanked them and they were on their way. Not content with the information they gave me, I decided to double-check the apartment myself. Nothing was off, though. No missing or broken items, No damage to furniture, floor, or walls. Nothing. I approached the storage door and stared at it, not sure what I was even thinking. I felt mesmerized, unable to break my gaze from it. The apartment was empty, and yet this room was unchecked despite being tightly locked. It felt like that game when an item is hidden under 3 cups which are shuffled and you already lifted the 2 which were empty, so you just knew the item was in the remaining cup. I felt myself grabbing the doorknob and twisting it. No dice. I pulled and pushed a few times, rattling the door handle in the process, but it wouldn't even budge. It was as though it was welded shut to the frame. Eventually, I figured the cops were probably right. I heard the noise from elsewhere and just misidentified the inside of my apartment as the source. Still though, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy that night, so I double-checked all the windows and made sure they were closed and locked the door with both the bolt and the key. I was determined not to let anyone invade my private space. A few more days went by and nothing out of the ordinary happened. I had forgotten completely about the incident that happened a few days ago, and I simply went by with my daily routines. Then one night as I slept, I was suddenly jolted awake from bed. I was drenched in cold sweat and breathing heavily. A feeling of immense dread came over me, which made me dart around the dark bedroom with my eyes. It felt as though I had just woken up from a nightmare, but there were no dreams in my memory. Something was definitely off. And then I heard it. The faint sound of a door closing shut came from outside my room. I glanced at the closed door of my room, trying to calm my breathing down. No other sound was heard, just the deafening silence of anticipation. I slowly got out of my bed and tiptoed to the door, putting my ear against it. At first I thought I heard nothing, but as I listened closer, I heard it. A barely audible scratching sound. Something about it sounded off. It was as if it was too deliberate, too controlled. The scratching would last for one excruciatingly long moment, as if something was dragged across the wall very slowly. And then it would stop for a moment before continuing with the exact same longevity and force, over and over. It sounded like it wasn't close to me though, so I slowly opened the door, peeking out into the hallway. The scratching became louder now. I identified its source from down the hallway, so I followed it, carefully taking each step. Before I even got there, I knew where the sound was coming from, the damn storage room. As I went around the corner and neared the door with each step, the scratching became faster and more intense, and the pauses shorter. By the time I reached the door, it was so loud that I expected the neighbors to come knocking on the door, complaining of the racket. I stared at the door for a moment, listening to the ear-splitting scratching noise which permeated my entire apartment. I approached and ever so slowly placed my ear against the door. The moment I did that, the scratching stopped. Not like it was the last scratch and whoever was inside decided to stop, but more like I interrupted them and they heard me by the door and simply stopped their final scratch midway. I heard myself exhaling a slow and trembling exhale. The silence which suddenly enveloped the room felt more threatening than the loud noise from just before. It was like the silence in horror films where you hold your breath during an intense scene and you're in anticipation of a jump scare. I tried to steady my breathing and detect any faintest sounds coming from the storage room, but nothing came. Then, out of nowhere there was a bang on the door from the other side, so loud that it sent me flying backwards on my ass. I didn't try to hide my panting this time. I stared at the door, expecting something to happen, the door to open and someone or something to jump out.
Please like, share and subscribe for part 2.